Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. 2 hours. 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. And we're not going to take calls today. It's just Joey and me. And we're going to talk about what it was like when we grew up. I received a request from Amit Singh, one of our classmates, and he asked what influenced me to be the way I am. What were my parents like? What was my, what were my experiences when I was growing up? And it just so happened that coincided with Joey and me talking on the telephone. And Joey wanted to do the same thing, talk about what it was like, how we grew up, what was different back in the 1950s and the 1960s. So what shaped us? What influenced us? What made us the way we are, the way we just speak our minds, the way we shape our thought processes, things that we value, things that we don't like, things that we won't accept. And Joey and I are on the same page for a great deal of likes, dislikes, values, and many experiences. And I didn't meet Joey when I was growing up. I met him through the expo. And we became friends and have been great, close friends for all these years. Welcome, Joey.
Hey, good morning, Vince. That's a great little introduction.
Well, isn't it true?
Yeah, it is. And there's only one word. The one word that molded both of us is family. That's the one word. And that's something that lacks in our society today. People just don't get it. I mean, I don't know what they get anymore. It's getting to be a Saturday of events every day.
Joey, there's something that's really foreign to me that I've been hearing more of each year over the last 15 years. And it relates to family distrust and family dishonesty. I'm talking about within the family. I'm talking about brothers versus sisters, sisters versus brothers, children versus parents. And what I mean is they want something that's not theirs. Okay? They want to inherit from their parents. They want their grandparents to die right away so they can get what they believe is rightfully theirs. I've never heard of things like that when I was growing up. Everyone in my family wanted everyone to live a long, healthy, happy, productive life. No one wanted what another person got or earned. Are you seeing that same thing where there's distrust within the family? I'm talking about the blood family, the bloodlines.
Yeah, once the matriarch passes, it's all up for grabs. And it doesn't matter if it's a grandparent. When the grandparents go, then it's the parents. When the parents go, then it's you. And if you have kids, those kids, they are even worse. And I've seen it time and time again. I mean, it's my family, it's my cousins, the whole mirage. Back in the mid-'70s, we would have family gatherings. The particular one is the one uncle would always have a great 4th of July party. 75 people, barbecue, a half a pig or a whole bunch of chickens, just all kinds of neat things. Volleyball games all day long. Everybody got, and I mean, that was more exciting than Christmas. Christmas, you knew you were going to get some gifts, but this is where you got to go see your favorite cousins, your favorite aunts and uncles. You got to hear stories. It was like better than going to the fair. It was all of the above. And slowly, as that started to change in the early 80s, when people got older and their families start having families, and it just started to fall apart. And I mean, you could just watch that. And that's a programmed issue somebody created for our society. I mean, probably some of these great college professors, and it's usually, what do they say? If you want to promote communism, one of the first things you have to do is destroy the family. So it's easy to destroy the family. The people that I see today that still have strong family values, at least in my area, are Spanish Mexican, because they're the first generation coming here, and they still had those values back from where they came from, and they knew they could only win if they were a complete unit. All the brothers, sisters, parents, they all still live in the same house, probably like it was in the 50s here in the 60s, as the different, and my grandparents came here in the 30s, but they all lived in the same house. All those kids lived in the house. Even when they got married, they were living in an extra room in the house or an extra apartment in the garage, just so that they could pull some money and pull forward. That doesn't exist today, because that Uncle Sam, he'll send you money. If you're married, you can get a divorce, and he'll send one half of you the money, and nobody needs to work today, and nobody needs to pull together. I mean, that's how I see it. What do you think about that, Vince?
Well, I was listening very intently to what you were saying. Our family's different. Our children, our boys, live in the same house as my wife and I do. And I love it. I mean, we literally built this house for my parents, Mrs. Finelli, me, and our children. That's what we built it for. And my parents died one at a time. And then, in the last 15 years. So it's just the boys. And our daughter loves living on the East Coast. She thinks that, it's great. She has a fabulous job. She gets paid quite handsomely. And, the farm life, although she grew up with the farm life, she likes the 24-hour convenience. But, she went to the university at age 14, and some of that ilk rubbed off on her. I'm not saying, anything negative. I'm just saying that, things that are acceptable because they happen all around her are unacceptable to me. She has some friends who are homosexuals. I don't. But it's interesting. It's interesting. I love having the family live in the same house. I really do. We have one insurance bill. We have one tax bill. We do consume some electricity off the grid, on the grid if we want to. So that'd be one electric bill. And, there's one driveway to maintain. And, one set of tools instead of having, 5 sets of tools. It really works very well. There's some economies of scale, and it's helped us get along with very little money. And, there's no money in farming. There really isn't. So we paved our own way. We are dependent on us rather than on other people. There's no guy that we call. If something gets broken, we just don't call a guy. We fix it ourselves. And, you were talking about the celebrations. Well, Memorial Day was a day of remembrance in our family. But the family would get together. All my uncles were involved in fighting off either the Germans or the Japanese in World War II. All of them. And they were all scarred in some level. They saw combat. And they saw the kamikaze planes. And Memorial Day was a day that we all got together. The grandparents, the parents, the aunts, the uncles, the grandchildren. We all got together. I got a chance to spend some time with all my cousins, in the backyard of the grandparents' house. And that's when the barbecue was. It was hamburgers. And my grandfather would buy 2 cases of quart bottles of soda, and they were in glass bottles. And you had a bottle opener to remove the cap. And there was grape soda and pineapple soda and cherry soda and cream soda. It was a case of, assorted flavors. And it was a great time. It was laughing. It was the family. And you hardly ever hear anything like that happening today. And I miss it. And when the grandparents died, it died very quickly thereafter. And that's what happened, exactly what you said. And was it the same in your family, or do you still do it?
No. I mean, you know what? Occasionally we'll get together, and when they're not planned, they're the best parties. My little sister, she had that stroke, so as she got stronger and better, I would take her to Chicago to a Chinese guy I go to. So on the way back, I said, call that one cousin you like. So she texted her, and we ended up getting together, and it just turned out to be incredible. The next time, a couple more of us got together, and, we got some food. We all went down to they've got a shop. They do some installation of garage doors. We got together. We spent about 4 hours together, and, I mean, those are memorable moments. And it was, everybody found time to get together for 3 or 4 hours. If I wasn't there to go to the Chinese guy, my little sister wouldn't have been there, and we all get together. And it's like, the thing I could never understand, when I'd come in to Chicago, I'd usually get together with a couple of the cousins. We'd go have lunch or breakfast. I said, why don't you guys do this? Well, we don't have time. I said, you don't have time? How can you not have time? You live 15 minutes apart. You don't have time once a week to go get a cup of coffee or go get breakfast or whatever it is? You don't have time? But when I come, see, when you come in, I said, yeah, but see, I don't come in that often, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and we're all getting older. I mean, the one cousin's going to be 77, the other one's going to be 60-ish plus, and I'm going to be 60-ish, and, pretty soon, if you don't have time today, and since this nonsense, this lockdown, well, I haven't been that way in 10 weeks. Not to say I haven't wanted to go. And if you don't make time every day for the simplest pleasure, and one thing I'll say, if there's one thing that I say I've learned from watching television that's based on them showing the people that were put in the camps in Germany, those people would get together and have dinner, put a nice clothes on, which doesn't mean nothing to me, a little music, maybe light a candle, and they would sit there and have conversation. But that, if you don't take that, that's my opinion, if you don't take the time to do that, then what's the purpose? Hurry it up to get up, what? Hurry it up to get up, to go to work, to go back to sleep, to get up, to go to work, to get to sleep. And repetitively, and before you know it, you look in the mirror and you're like, wow, I'm Rip Van Winkle. When did this all take place?
Yeah, and how about those people who say, I was going to call you, or I tried to call you. My response is, well, did you pick up the phone? What they're really saying is they didn't have time. We'll be right back. Class, we're doing something that we've never done before, telling you a little bit about how we grew up and what was important to us and what shaped us. And that central theme goes back to the family. Mother, father, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, grandparents, maybe even great-grandparents. And it's something that I absolutely miss. I miss Easter with the grandparents. I miss Christmas with the grandparents. The big holidays where my grandmother would spend all day cooking, all day. She would make ravioli by hand. She would make the dough. She would fill these great big raviolis. They would be one of them, just one, would be about half the size of a dinner plate. So if you had two of them, that'd be a lot. If you had three, it's like almost impossible to do. And it's all made by hand. And that's the way it was. And they were hand cut, hand filled. The sauce was from the tomatoes that were grown in the garden, in the backyard, with the basil that was grown in the garden, and the onions and the peppers. All of it was from the garden, with the exception of the meat. And that was from the supermarket back in the 1950s. Joey, was it similar in your family?
Yeah, only different. We didn't make raviolis. My aunt would make pierogies, which are little Polish dough pies with meat, cheese, sour cream, or sauerkraut. I mean, and the one aunt, she had a very small house, 1,200 feet. There were 75 people in that house. And nobody complained in the summer when it was too hot or there wasn't enough room. It was a pleasure to be able to do that. I remember the end of her journey, she had some kind of a cancer. And so I would take a ride to Chicago every other week to go visit her. And every time I would come, I'd bring a cake or a pie, 2 pies. And my one cousin says, "Why do you do that?" I said, "Why do I do what? Why do you bring a cake or a pie?" He says, "Because there's that one time I remember coming to your mother's home as a kid that she didn't have something here. And if you all were eating dinner, and me and my dad and my sister were there, she all of a sudden took enough food away from you guys to make 3 more plates. And everybody always had enough. Or there was always a dessert. I says, and she can't get out of bed. And you don't think that bothers her? That she can't be doing what she's done her whole life? So, yeah, it was my turn to at least bring the dessert. So everybody had something. Because, how can you not think about the great times we had? And he looks at me, wow. And, I mean, that's a real original thinker that he has to say, wow. And then it made sense. But, I mean, if I didn't break it down for him, he couldn't comprehend that. So, no, it's exactly like you say, Vince, and you know what? That's why you and I do get along, because we have those family connections from days gone by. I mean, our country apparently will not survive what's coming unless they start pulling together instead of pulling apart. Because it's easy to fail. Just don't even try. And it takes effort. Sometimes it takes the effort. And I get it. Eventually, if you take the effort all the time, it's not worth so-called benefit. I mean, you got to give and take and everything.
Well, you said something that was a very salient point. Nobody complained. I don't ever remember in all the years that I was fortunate enough to spend that time with my grandparents and my parents and aunts and uncles, for those great big holidays. Nobody complained. And my grandmother, they had a small kitchen, a gas stove in the kitchen. The stove was running all day even in the warm weather. The windows were open. Nobody complained that it was stifling hot. Nobody. And even though it was crowded in terms of people per square feet, nobody said, this isn't big enough. We can't all fit in here. But we did. We did fit in there, and it was a wonderful time. I don't think that's the way it is today. I think there's a lot of complaining going on. We'll be right back. Class, Amit Singh, one of your classmates, wanted to know about what influenced our lives when we were growing up. And Joey in Michigan and I are telling you for 2 hours today. And one of my teachers, I've had some very, very brilliant teachers. I've been extremely fortunate. I am the most fortunate person on the planet. At least that's my opinion, to have wonderful teachers. And Joey's one of my teachers as well. And And so is the faculty of USA Prepares. So I'm learning all the time. But one of my teachers in the 1970s, about 50 years ago, 50 years ago, was a man by the name of Frank Vincent Zappa. He died in 1993 at the age of 52. He was influential in my life, and he produced a song called Trouble Coming Every Day in 1966. That was 54 years ago when he produced it. It was about the Watts riot, or the Watts riots in 1965 in Los Angeles, California. The riots lasted 6 days. And until now, the 1960s saw the most serious and widespread series of race riots in the history of the United States. Major riots occurred in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963, and in New York City in 1964, and in the Watts section, W-A-T-T-S section of Los Angeles, California in 1965, and in Chicago, Illinois in 1966. In 1967, there were riots in Tampa, Florida, Cincinnati, Ohio, Atlanta, Georgia, Newark, New Jersey, Plainfield, New Jersey, New Brunswick, New Jersey, Detroit, Michigan. There were riots in all those cities. Actually, in 1968, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, there were more than 110 riots across the United States. And Frank Zappa wrote this song about the rioting, the looting, and you will even hear some of the words that I use on this broadcast, like slashing, crashing, bashing, and burning. And we're going to play this now. It's not digital, so it was analog to digital, so it's not as easily understood as I'd like it to be. But we're going to do it anyway. It's about 5 minutes, and what you're going to hear is exactly what is happening right now in over 200 cities across the United States of America. All because of one cop and his three buddies and a weak mayor who tried to protect the cops. Jacob Frey. Okay, Jason, please play that. There you have it. So, Frank Vincent Zappa was one of my outstanding teachers. And what you heard was a song called Trouble Coming Every Day. And it was available in 1966. And there's nothing new. So, if you're wondering why I'm the way I am, it's because of my experiences. It's because of people I've met, teachers I've had. And I just want to make sure that it's difficult to hear what he said, but one of the lines was, no way to delay that trouble coming every day. No way to delay that trouble coming every day. And we said it right here on USA Prepares. I said it. I said that if the president stops, and this was before the $1,200 checks were out. I said, if they stop sending these checks, these delay the rioting checks, if they stop, the rioting will begin. And I said, but this was before the rioting. I said, these checks are to delay the rioting. Frank Zappa said 54 years ago, no way to delay that trouble coming every day. Joe, any comments about that?
Tell everybody to go find that song and then look at the lyrics. Because when you read the lyrics, there's nothing different than 50 years. Just like when they were storming the Bastille and killing the French aristocracy. It doesn't matter the time. People are people, and people will have a time. And everybody's had enough. I mean, now I'm reading this morning, Antifa is sending busloads of people to a town called Sparta, Illinois, a farm town, because they want to destroy white people that are on farms. How did this thing, obviously, think about how you could have, just like the virus, they hit the world, and within 2 weeks, the entire world had corona. Wow, what an amazing thought. Now all of a sudden, there's now one person that I know, unless they're deranged, that would have found what happened to George Floyd. I mean, that was a crime. It was a tragedy. That cop should have been shot right there. And those other three onlookers, they took a duty. They pledged an oath to protect the public. What public were they protecting? They're as guilty as the guy that was on the guy's neck. We all agree with that. But you have to ask the question, what was this whole show about? How does this thing travel and do as much damage? I mean, one thing I've noticed, all these third world countries, I'm not saying who orchestrated takeovers in third world countries, but apparently there's been a lot of practice over the last 50 or 75 years. And one thing you'll always hear the military say before they go and destroy or invade a country, they want to win the hearts of the people they're going to destroy. Win the hearts of the people. You know, I didn't want this to be political, but listening to that song, thinking about Antifa and everybody burning buildings, breaking windows, I don't pay attention to a lot of that. But my little sister, she's got more time now with the stroke, and she was telling me, you know, they had very peaceful, whatever you want to call them, parades about in Kalamazoo. Everybody got their point across. They all agreed what took place was bad. And then in the middle of the night, after everybody went to sleep, 4 a.m, a group of something came and broke windows and did all kinds of damage. Now, that's not normal behavior. Now, who is enticing this? Everybody needs to go research what took place during the Russian Revolution in the early 1900s. And I didn't know there were two revolutions. There was the first one, like in 1905, that didn't work. So they came back in 17, 18, 19. And, you know, people got a little more fitzy with that. But people better start realizing there's something coming that we don't even see. But you can feel it, you just can't see it. And you don't smell it yet. You definitely get the bump, the chills.
Yeah, and it's like frequencies. You can listen to one channel at a time, but that's not all there is. There's thousands of channels. So Joey and I are talking about growing up, and Frank Zappa was one of my instructors. And what I'm trying to share with you is your instructor's thoughts, actions, beliefs may rub off on you. So might the people with whom you spend time. So Frank Zappa was the oldest of 4 children. He was raised in an Italian-American household. Italian was often spoken by his grandparents. And the family moved often because his father was a chemist and a mathematician. He worked in the defense industry. After a time in Florida in the 1940s, the family moved to Maryland, where Frank Zappa's father worked at Edgewood Arsenal. It's a chemical warfare facility of the Aberdeen Proving Ground run by the U.S. Army. And because the home where they lived was close to the arsenal that stored mustard gas, chemical weapon, gas masks were kept in the home in case of an accident. And that living arrangement had a profound effect on Frank Vincent Zappa in regarding germs, germ warfare, ailments, and the defense industry work throughout his family's life. And what I'm trying to tell you is that came through in his music. He was angry. And he should have been angry. As we are angry about what's happening. So, as a result, I've postulated the following. This is from me. These are my opinions. That any person, and what we're saying is how growing up affected who we are and what we believe. So here's my thought. Any person involved in the development, storage, and use of chemical and biological weapons should be executed for the crimes that they've committed against every living thing on the planet. Now, strong statement? I don't think it's strong enough. Why do I say these things? Because of how I grew up. I grew up to treasure and respect all forms of life. All forms of life. And so did Frank Zappa. And I believe Joey too. There are people who, when they see a turtle crossing the street or the road, try to hit it and squash it. That's sick. That's foreign to everything that I know and believe. Nobody, my grandparents didn't run over turtles and smash them. That never happened. And neither did my parents. But some people do that kind of thing. I don't want to kill snakes. Life is precious. And what we're seeing is that we are surrounded by things that we find distasteful and disgusting. And that is war. That is abuse of power. Those are the things that we weren't going to talk about. But the way we were raised makes us hate and despise those kinds of things. Someone burning down someone else's house. Really? Really? The government pushing us around and telling us what we will and won't do and how high we're going to jump. We're sick of it. Why? Because of the way we were raised. We weren't raised that way. Joey, any comments?
You know, I just sit here and I think if you didn't like somebody, you stayed away from them. But like here, we've got a governor. If you don't like her, you can't stay away from her because you're not going to leave your house. And I'm thinking that poor simpleton individual, she's just done such a remarkable job promoting who and what she is. And I noticed there's two kinds of people. Yesterday, I wore the first diaper on my face for about 4 minutes. I went to the store. Only because the store just opened and it was a junk store. But what I've learned is that any store that is run by liberal people, they wear the diaper. That mask is the greatest, most important thing. And I mean, and I wouldn't have worn one, but they had one. So I said, yeah, I'll take that. I went to the store the other day, and they all looked at me like I was glowing red, and I had horns sticking out of my head, and I had a pitchfork because I didn't have a mask on. And I looked at them, and I just shook my head, and I started to laugh. But, I mean, at some point, Vince, all things aside, we are who we are because, what's that phrase, lead, follow, or get out of the way? Well, I tend to believe we tend to lead a little more than we like to follow. And those are choices that we created growing up because our parents taught us. They taught us the difference between right and wrong. And when somebody's doing wrong, you can't never convince me it's right. I mean, it's just not going to happen, and that's what's happening to us right now as a society.
Yeah, because of how we were raised. When we come back, I'll tell you a little bit about my elementary education and into my high school education, and maybe into the university level. We'll talk about what we learned in school. Joey's with us. We're talking about growing up in the 1950s and the 1960s. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Joey's with us. He's in Michigan, and he and I are talking about growing up, what it was like, because Amit Singh asked what influenced me in my life, and Joey and I decided to talk about it. And so I started the public school system in the 1950s. I had a very difficult time reading, extremely difficult. The words would not stay still on the page. They would jump around. And so I was probably the slowest reader in the class for years. And so to keep those words from jumping around, I would put a piece of pink or blue strip of paper underneath each line on the page I was reading, and it kind of helped them stay still a little bit. And so I forced myself. It was embarrassing because I couldn't read. And Mrs. Finelli, who was in 4th grade with me, she was one of the best readers in the class. So it was terrible. It was terrible to be the worst reader in the class. So I forced myself to find things that I liked that involved reading. And that was Popular Mechanics, the magazine. There was a catalog, radio and electronics catalog called Lafayette Radio and Electronics. I read that cover to cover many, many, many times. And I read the owner's manuals of things like lawnmowers and washing machines and how to maintain them. And I was interested in those kinds of things. And as I progressed through elementary school, one of the things I really enjoyed was the competitive nature of the science fairs. And some of the children who were classmates had parents who worked for Bell Laboratories and electronics engineering companies. And I was competing with them, and my dad was a school principal. Now, although my dad knew physics and chemistry, he didn't know electronics the way the way I wanted to study electronics on my own. So one year I made an analog computer. Literally, it was on a piece of pegboard, and it would add, subtract, multiply, or divide any two numbers. And it was analog. It was not a digital computer, and it absolutely worked, and it won first place. I built a lie detector, and I used an analog volt ohm meter, and I used a vacuum tube to increase the sensitivity of the volt ohm meter, and a DC power supply, which is dry cells, that would power the vacuum tube. And this would measure the galvanic response across from the tip of the pointing finger on the left hand to the tip of the pointing finger on the right hand. It would measure the body's chemical change based on resistance to measuring current when people were asked those series of questions that you see on TV for lie detecting. And it absolutely worked. And it was analog as well. And then the next one I built was something called a capacity-operated relay. And that was a device that I used a 8.5 by 11 cardboard backer that was on a pad of paper. I covered it with aluminum foil. I had a wire lead to a vacuum tube amplifier, and it would sense the proximity of a body, like a person, getting close to it. So it would be normally off, and when you got close to this, it would force the relay to close, and you could turn on a light, ring the alarm, open a door with a mechanical system, whatever you wanted to do, but it would throw the relay. And so, you could it'd be like putting your hand near a screen and having this electronic system know that you're there. And when you backed away, it would not know you were there. So, and that worked. And so all of my projects won first place, and I did them on my own. They were crude looking. I still have them to this day. But that challenged me to compete, to build a better mousetrap against people who had more wherewithal, people who had parents who could do it for them. But I won every time because you could see that I did it. You could see that, it wasn't made in a machine shop. It was made by a guy who had some wood and some screws and some Fonstock clips and some capacitors, and you could see it was homemade, but it worked. And I think that was one of the great things that made me who I am today. The challenge of the situation, which is something that I find in radio every day. No one has a gun to my head saying, you will get up in the morning and you will do radio. I only do radio because I want to do radio. I want to teach. Joey, any comments about your life and how it shaped you in those early days?
Well, my parents. My dad, he had a very simple philosophy. He tried to prepare you to what you might possibly need as you grow up and go through life. And it was important that you had hands-on experience. And I think about while you were talking about your science projects, I'm thinking about most people today, most children today, their parents aren't capable of anything. I mean, they can't even put air in their tires. I mean, it's an embarrassing situation as a society where we've grown to. And I mean, you and I talking about aren't going to fix it. The thing I admire the most, again, the Mexican people around here, you can tell when there's a holiday. Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving. There's 30, 40 cars in their yard. And that's because they're still, and again, the old generation, but their kids and their kids' kids don't show up because that's a science project our country does. It takes a good working family and tears it apart. You know, there's a phrase, a little sign I have in home. It's where your story begins. Well, our story began because of who our home and who our parents were. I mean, I can see today when you have broken families, who's teaching? When there's not a father and a father, and there's a lot of mothers that are pretty talented. I mean, they can use power tools, but do they have the time to teach their children? I mean, today it seems like everybody wants to teach how to be a transgender, not how to fix something, not how to grow a garden, not how to, even if you don't need to grow a garden, your children should know where food comes from. And if you put a seed in the ground and you put effort and energy towards something, you get a result. You get a result that could change your life, teach you how to grow food, teach you why you should grow food. I look at this whole thing and there's only one way to fix it. And the answer I have isn't a very good answer because you can't fix something. You can do maintenance on it, but apparently the maintenance we do to each other doesn't work. I mean, most people, like you tell the story of the guy with diabetes. No, I love bread. Well, it won't be till they cut a limb off that they'll quit maybe possibly eating bread. Instead of just cutting back and have bread once a week, nope, I still got to have it 5 times a week or whatever it was. So our families molded who we are. My favorite times growing up were family get-togethers. You know, my uncle, he had a good-sized hill in his backyard, and he created a little ski hill with a rope hill. So we would drive from Michigan to Chicago. The rest of the cousins would come around, and we all go skiing in his backyard. I mean, can you imagine going to a private little ski resort? And again, everybody looked forward to it. Everybody brought stuff. You know, it was winter time. Sometimes the ride home was 5 or 6 hours, which is normally 2 hours. But it was well worth the effort. And I mean, I always remember how excited I was to go and how devastated I was to go home, to come back to away from all that fun and excitement. And then for the next few weeks, just like school. You like school. I didn't care for school. And there were a handful of good teachers, but then again, for a while, I had the Penguin for a teacher. I mean, we had one nun taught first and second grade, so we went through, first grade was the same nun, first and second grade, third grade, the one nun switched out, and then fifth and sixth grade, everything changed at school. Then we went to the public school after that. And they were great teachers. One of my favorite teachers, though, as I grew up and I learned, they promoted a one-world government. And when you're in the informative years, 15, 16, man, that all sounded great. But my favorite thought was when he says Social Security, how wonderful it is. I said, so let me get this right. I'm going to give somebody my money, let them hold it for 40 or 50 years, and they're going to give it back to me. He goes, yeah, you'll see. It'll be good for you. And I'm like, wow, what's wrong with that picture? Would you give anybody $200 to hold for you? And then when you need it back, they're going to give it to you? I mean, and I always knew, even at 16, by the time I'm going to need to get that free money, it won't be there. That was an instinctive trait I happen to have in me. And I'm really fortunate because I have some great intuition. And again, I know whatever's happening is unlike. On the outside, it's one thing, but the outcome of this can't be very good. This has got to be a much, much, much bigger mess coming. Go ahead,
Interesting. You're talking about some of these early years, and it just jogged my memory about my dad telling me that when he was growing up, His mother and father would put the family in the car, and, once in a while they would go down to the shore, meaning the ocean. And this was back in the 1930s. Maybe the early 1940s. And those were the days when tires had tire tubes. And you would have a hand pump, kind of like a bicycle tire pump, to pump up the tires if they went flat. And he was telling me this story several times about how this one time they got 7 flats on the way to the shore. 7 flats. So each time it was jack everybody out of the car, use the hand jack to jack up the car, use the hand lug wrench to take off the wheel, then dismount the tire so that they could pull the tire tube out, take the tire patch, or find the hole, put the patch on. You'd have to light a match to vulcanize the patch onto the tube, then wait till it cooled, then put the tube back into the tire, and then pump it up again. And then once it was pumped up, then what you would do is put the wheel back on the car, tighten the lug nuts, lower the vehicle with the car with the jack, get back in, and 6 more flats just like it to go. What would happen today? Do you think anybody could fix a tire tube, patch it, even know what's wrong, and do that themselves 7 times in one trip? Do you think anybody would do that today? So, class, why did I tell you the story about the 1930s, the trip to the shore where my grandfather and my father and his brothers and sisters went to the shore? Why did I tell you that about the 7 flats? I remember that story for 60 years. Why? Because what that told me is something, there used to be an old word, and I don't think it's a word anymore, but it's called stick-to-itiveness. And what that means is, if you stay with it and you don't give up, you can probably get through it. Stick-to-itiveness. Stick-to-itiveness. That was a term that was used in the 1950s and 1960s, maybe even before that. So I decided that I wanted to build a go-kart. Maybe I was 14 years old. And I we didn't have a lot of tools, but we had an electric drill. It was an old one. And we had some drill bits. And I got a shelf board, 5 feet long, 12 inches wide, 1 inch thick. And I mounted a 3/4 horsepower Briggs & Stratton engine, a horizontal shift engine to it. And I got a fan belt, and I got a pulley off a washing machine, and I bolted the pulley to a wheel. And for an axle, I used used to have curtain rods that were made with steel covered with brass, and I used that for an axle. And I did not have a clutch. Okay, so when you started the engine, the wheel would turn. So I would have the go-kart rear wheels up on blocks so that when I started the engine, the rear wheels would spin, but they were off the ground. And then I could rock, I could hop in this seat, which was just a board, a backboard, and I could rock this thing off the blocks and off I would go. Steering was a 2x4 with another curtain rod axle, 2 wheels from an old lawnmower, and 1 bolt through this 2x4 that would allow me to pivot, and I would steer it with my feet. Okay, so this thing was really primitive, and the brake was just an oak stick, piece of oak flooring, leftover scrap of oak flooring, and I would pull up on this thing, and it would rub against the road, and I could kill the engine and come to a stop. That was my first go-kart. And I used to ride that darn thing all over the neighborhood. And you know what? Nobody called the cops. Nobody called the cops. Was it illegal? Absolutely. It was operating a motorized vehicle on the road without license plates, without inspection, and underage. It was illegal every way you can think of. Nobody called the cops. Actually, the neighbors were okay with it. They thought, wow, here's a guy who is innovative. And they actually thought it was pretty interesting. And it was okay with my parents. Joey, any stories like that?
You're talking about it, and I was thinking about one of those issues of Lassie, where the little kid gets swept away in a balloon, gets caught in a tree. Because he goes to Cub Scouts, he learns how to bring the dog down in a harness, builds a fire, makes a bow, shoots a wild pig, cooks dinner while there was actually 1945 Lassie series. He did all of that. And that's when you're building a country. When you're tearing a country down, you're teaching children how to be transgenders because it's okay. And they shouldn't always want to be a winner. I mean, when we were growing up, everybody, the harder you tried, the better the reward. You got an award. It's called winning. Today, winning doesn't exist. And the only way winning exists is if you are an overachiever and they take your stuff and they give it to the underachiever, then they let him win too, because everybody should win. I mean, that's why the world you and I grew up in, we crave so much desire to go back to that doesn't exist. I mean, how do you even think you can explain to today's people, today's children, today's 40-year-olds, they've never seen that, they don't know. I mean, when you walk in a store and you watch these parents, especially when this all started, they bring their whole family in the store and they're putting them in harm's way to pick a virus up. Why would you bring your whole family in if you just needed to get necessities? They didn't even think that far out of the box.
Yep. We'll be right back, and I'll tell you a story about a track loader. I think of it like a bulldozer. And my thought process, and I called Joey, and I asked for his help. So years ago, we had a drought here in Missouri, and I was telling Joey that I wanted to buy a bulldozer to clear a fire break, so that if there were a fire, that our farm would be, somewhat protected from it, and if we had to, we could use this bulldozer to put out a fire. And I told him what I was looking at, and he said, here's what you want to do. You want to get, and he gave me the exact make and model. Happened to be a Caterpillar, which I believe in its day at this time for this particular machine was top of the line. And so we bought a 40-year-old or so Caterpillar, the exact model that Joey recommended. And did I ever use one before? No. And did Joey ever use a bulldozer before he used a bulldozer? No. So both of us taught ourselves how to use a piece of heavy equipment. Before we bought a used backhoe, I never had a backhoe. When I was growing up, nobody in my family had a backhoe. So I thought that we needed an old backhoe for excavating and repairing things on the farm. So we bought one, and we bought a track loader, which you can consider a fairly heavy bulldozer. I guess it weighs about 25,000 pounds. Joey, any comments?
Vince, the only way you can learn anything is to try. And today, who tries? You try, I try. The people we tend to, congregate around, we all try. I was giggling. I was putting some siding on. I put galvanized tin on my back porch because I wanted to look like it's been there for 40 years. And I was 13 years old when I was helping my dad build a barn, and we were putting the same kind of tin on. Only the tin of 40 years ago was a superior 50 years ago, 48 years ago. The tin was a superior tin, much better quality, much better galvanized. But I'm putting this on, and the one day in particular, because my hips didn't bother me. And so when I got done, I come and sat down, and then it dawned on me. It was 32 years, about the same time that my dad died 32 years ago. And but prior to that, I was sitting here thinking, wow. So at 13, I was getting guidance that I didn't even know I was going to use for almost 40-some years later. And I just get a chuckle out of the whole story because what you and I are talking about, most people, it'll go right over their head. A handful of them, it'll make the difference. And the handful of people that it makes the difference to will enable them to walk upright, not ask for help. And it's okay to ask for help. The sad part of help is that once you ask for it and you learn, you shouldn't have to ask again for that particular help. Ask for a different kind of help. Always try to learn. Always try to increase. You and I both do that. I always chuckle when I hear the do it the Joey way, when we met. And however it is, he invited me over for something. I brought some plants. I brought some books. I brought whatever pictures. But I do that with everybody because I want to see how you're going to treat me. And I don't mind treating you like I want to be treated, but once you cross my path and you mistreat me, I don't even want to talk to you again, not alone help you. I don't even want to talk to you. And I have to say, the one thing as I gotten older, I've got friends for 40 years, and I got a handful of them because we have different political views. And those people, there's just a handful of those that I still honor our relationship and friendship with, because the other ones, they're completely oblivious and they want to argue, and I don't want to argue with you. If I'm going to argue, why don't I go take a nap, go get a cookie and have a glass of milk and relax? But if I got to argue with you to be my friend, you're not my friend. And that again is the whole situation as our families pulled apart. Why argue with people? I told one cousin a few years ago, you should go buy a few bags of beans in case he says, aren't you going to feel silly? Aren't you going to feel silly? And you have those beans and you don't need them. I says, aren't you going to feel silly if you need those beans and you can't buy them? I says, a 100-pound bag of pinto beans was $32 at the time. So, geez, for $300 or for $100, you could get 300 pounds of beans. How's that feeling silly? And, what's that phrase? Those that fail to plan to fail. I'm not telling you to change your life. But, again, I was thinking about when you and I talk about these people going on $8,000 and $10,000 and $12,000 vacations. Our vacation is doing something around the house. Our vacation is having the extra 8 or 10 grand, whether it's to buy a tractor, a backhoe, a skid steer, build a little building outside, whatever it is. Those are our vacations. And these people, they got to have a vacation. They got to go somewhere nice because they earned that. We earned it too. And we have different values. And it's not right. It's not wrong. But I'll attribute the values. The one thing we have in common, both of our parents came through the Depression, and our grandparents came here from Europe, different parts of Europe, but they all came with nothing. All they could carry, whatever was in a suitcase, a bag, that was it. And yet they were able to raise families, get a house. Let's make sure we don't forget to talk about the Italian grandma. What's that called? Bon Appetito is her website. And just see that's the most generous heart. She's an older lady, 80 plus, 83, 87, I don't know. But how she cans tomatoes, how she makes meals, and she's always interested. She's the matriarch of that family. And I watched the video, not to learn how to do the tomatoes, but I watched 5 others just because watch her reminded me of the family I grew up with. The aunts that were so generous, my grandma. And that's what our life's about. And our life is about your and mine life, sharing ideas. If I don't know how to do something, I call you, hey, you ever did that? Yeah, do this. You call me, hey, do that. Yeah, this is what I would do. Yeah, great idea. And we share that. And why relearn all of that if we can take a shortcut, ask somebody that already did it, and it just makes you feel good because now you've eliminated all those extra steps. Isn't that how you like to work as well, Ben?
Yeah. And you mentioned the Italian grandmother, and you sent me the video, and I watched it. And this is an Italian grandmother speaking broken English. And someone in her family said, Ma, how about you teach people how to, can tomatoes? And so this senior citizen, she's she's all dressed, and she says that, this is step, and she's talking about the step that she's standing on. He made it for me so that I can reach the pot, because she's having a tough time reaching this tall, tomato stock pot where she's, cooking the tomatoes. And at the end, she's smiling and she's happy and she's saying this is why you do what you do in broken English. And then she says, thank you so much. Thank you for, all that you do. She's thanking the audience.
For watching.
And for watching. And thank you so much for all your help. And there's nobody to thank other than her family, right? But she's thanking all the watchers of this video. And that was the way it used to be.
She's waving. She goes, it's me. It's Gina. Hi. It's me. It's Gina. And I hear that playing. I've been, working around the house for the last week, and I laugh and I giggle when I think of that. I can hear that voice repeating itself. Yeah, it's me. It's Gina. Hello. And it's beautiful. And that's the difference between old school, new school. And I'll have to assume we run on analog and all today's kids are running on digital. And I think those frequencies, you brought that word up a while back, those frequencies make a ginormous difference in how we act and react to each other's emotions.
Joey, in the studio, which is part of our farmhouse, I have a clock. And I have to have a clock in order to know what I'm doing, because radio is unforgiving when it comes to time. And the clock that I have on the wall is an atomic clock, but it looks exactly like the school clock that we had in the 1950s. It's got it's large, maybe over a foot in diameter. It's got a white dial, black large numbers, black hands, and a red second hand. So I really like analog. I have a watch. It's not a digital watch. It's an analog watch. I don't have a digital watch. I don't want a digital watch. It doesn't seem to work for me. So I am stuck in analog. Now, Joey, not all the times that we had growing up were pleasant. And, I've told the story once, but I broke down with my car when I was probably 17 years old. My dad was in World War II. And he was a first sergeant. And he was a very peaceful guy, about 6 feet tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, very athletic, fit and trim. He, in his 40s and 50s and 60s, he was still fit and trim. Well, I broke down and I walked to a payphone. That was my car. I said, hey, Dad, my car won't start. Can you come help me? I said, okay. So he brought some tools, and I was in an area that I hadn't been before. And so he showed up. And we had the hood raised on my car, and we were under the hood, and we saw this gang of ruffians coming toward us. And it looked like they were going to give us a real hard time. So my dad took 2 wrenches out of his back pocket. He kept the biggest one. He gave me the second biggest one. He said, we're going to get hurt. He said, but you see that little guy right there? This is going to be bad. We are going to get hurt. He said, we're going to have to kill him. So concentrate everything you do on him, and I will too. And so when they came to us, and they were looking for a fight, and we were outnumbered, probably 7 of them and 2 of us, and they were pretty big, except for this one little guy. My father indicated to the group by telling me, it's like leaning to me so they could hear, all right, so this is going to be terrible, but see that little one? And he pointed to him with his wrench. We're going to kill him. And you know what? They backed off. And that's the way, it wasn't all that pleasant. It's kind of funny to talk about it now. But, that was a whole different generation. And that's the generation that we, were raised by. No, we weren't looking for fights. We weren't looking to get over on anybody. We weren't part of the synagogue of greed. We just wanted to do the best we could and be left alone. That's what we wanted, Joey. And I mentioned to you, and I'm fine with sharing this. I said that my grandparents on both sides came from Italy. So if someone were to say, so if you were to trace your ancestry, what would it be? I would say Italian, 100%. But I said to you, Joey, you know, the Italians and you're Polish, said, boy, you know, if I had a choice to come back, I'd like to come back as Italian or Polish. Either one's fine with me. Because I have a tremendous respect for the ingenuity, the hard work, the stick-to-itiveness of both of those countries. Do you have any comments to that? Please do when we come back. A couple quick comments. You know, every once in a while I'll look at the Ron Gibson channel, thumbs up and thumbs down, to see how many people dislike or like what we do. Most of the time, we get, I'd say 25 to 50% thumbs down. And, but we have stick-to-itiveness. That doesn't deter us at all, you know, the negatives. I'm very interested to see, and I will check today and maybe tomorrow to see how many thumbs down we get on this particular broadcast, Joey. When I went to high school, you were taught by nuns, I was taught by brothers. And the nuns would wear black robes and white collars. The brothers were the men version of the nuns, and they would wear black robes and white collars. So I was taught for 4 years by the Jesuits at the high school level, all men high school. And to go to school, there was a dress code. And the dress code was really simple. Jacket, solid color shirt, long sleeve shirt, haircut, tie, belt that matched the shoes, polished shoes. That was the uniform. You could have anyone you wanted, but you had to have like a dress shirt, a sports jacket, or, you know, a sports coat, or a dress coat, slacks that matched. Everything had to match, and you had to have shoes, leather shoes, and they had to be polished. And you had to have a belt on. If you forgot the belt, there were demerits involved. If you forgot your tie, there were demerits involved. If you forgot your jacket, there were demerits involved. Nobody wanted to forget anything. And what we got for violating the dress code was something called a Saturday. And a Saturday was 8 hours of raking leaves, 8 hours of painting a barn, 8 hours of manual labor. Hot, sweaty, awful labor. Nobody wanted to get a Saturday. That's the way it was. Joey, any comments about me becoming Polish or the high school experience?
To answer your question, we didn't get demerits at school, but my dad would give us those same demerits if we didn't get our task addressed. We got extra work to do around the yard. But back to the ancestry part, Polish, Italian, I don't think that has anything to do with who you become. It's your honor and integrity, something you tend to like to promote a lot. It's who the people were that raised you. Because I know a lot of very talented people from every aspect. I had a guy call me the other day. I had some stuff for sale in the yard, and he says, "Yeah, y'all got you one of them backhoe buckets?" He says, "I'm looking for me a backhoe bucket." Well, I got a feeling I know his ancestry, and the guy was awesome. I mean, he was awesome. He says, "I won't be getting me one of them shots. If they come around with that COVID, I don't want that shot." And I mean, I don't care where you come from. I don't care who you are. There's always good people and there's always bad people. And that's the one thing that's a privilege of our country, that we have a mix of people. But it's who raised us, I think, has more of an important value. And the school, and today's schools, they teach you all kinds of nonsense. They teach you worthless endeavors, especially in the grade schools. When they're promoting, what's that called, transgenderism to children? It's not a child's decision to make when he's 5, 7, 12 years old, whether he wants to be a boy or a girl. He was born a particular way. When he gets to be an adult, if he wants to be a girl, great. If you're that ignorant, God bless you. And that means he will be lessened, is what he will be. Being blessed is to be lessened. But I truly believe our parents had a major influence on who we were. I mean, tell you the story, Vince. When I left you the one time at Ziggy's after one of your roundup meetings, I went over to your ma, I gave her a hug, and I said, thank you for raising Vinny the way you did so he could be who he is. She looked at me, and that's why the next time I seen you, I brought those rhododendron flowers, because the look in her eyes, nobody ever said that to her. And those flowers were to represent you guys and her when she was gone. And I mean, who thinks that far ahead? I do. You do. And if you don't think that way now, how are you going to think that way later? And when you don't get to go to a store and you have to make ends meet and fix something because it's not on the shelf, it's going to be real difficult. And, I'm sad for a lot of people that are just too ignorant to wake up. And I don't feel I have to help somebody's one thing, but to take food out of my mouth and help somebody that's too ignorant or lazy. Right now, everybody should be going on YouTube and learning how to. I've been canning food. I don't know how to can food. I watched some videos. That Michigan Snow Pony girl has one of the best meat canning videos. And that's how I learned. You learn that way. And we're learning, and you better be learning why all this knowledge is available. I guess it's over, huh? I guess, thank you. Be safe.
Well, Joe, I can't believe 2 hours. 2 hours went by so quickly. So maybe we should do this again. Talk about some more of what we were exposed to and what makes us the way we are. I'm stunned that 2 hours is gone.
That's
Joey, my dear friend.
That's usually how our conversations go when you and I are on the phone.
For hours, yeah. Joe, thanks so much. We'll do it again. Joe in Michigan, my very dear friend.